You booked it, episode 182. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me today on You Booked It, the #1 podcast where you learn how to create a successful entertainment career. Over the past few months, I have been working in the background putting together a little something that is pretty cool, and it is finally ready to share with you. I am excited to announce the You Booked It community. It is your go-to career resource and the only platform worldwide that covers the entire entertainment industry. From unlimited masterclasses to building industry relationships to chatting with Tony winners, Emmy nominees, and past podcast guests, the community has everything you need to navigate a successful entertainment career. Check it out for yourself. Head over to youbookeditpodcast.com/community or tap the link in the description of this episode, and we'll see you inside. And now, let's meet today's guest. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Keith Arthur Bolden. Are you ready for this, Keith?
I'm ready.
All right. Keith has done it all, from stage to screen to directing. A native of Los Angeles, California, he earned his MFA in acting from the University of Illinois and is an associate professor of theater and performance at Spelman College. Keith has worked on so many projects in so many facets of this industry. I only have time to list a small selection of his credits, and they include directing Hands Up, Pipeline, and Two Trains Running, acting in Paradise Blues, Fetch Clay, Make Man, Between Riverside and Crazy, and Dreamgirls, and film and television credits include Genius, Aretha Franklin, The Conjuring 3, American Soul, Mile 22, Cobra Kai, and The Haunting of Hill House. Keith, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, fill in the gaps, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry?
Awesome. Well, as you said, I'm from Los Angeles, California. Inglewood, to be specific, is where I spent my formidable years. And after graduating from high school, I went to Fresno State as a journalism major. So in high school, I worked at a movie theater. At the time, it was the only Black-owned and operated movie theater in the country. It was called the Baldwin Hills Theater. And I worked there for years as an usher and a projectionist. And I've always loved film. I loved looking at actors from a young age. Actually, before I could read, I recognized movie posters, iconic movie posters like Saturday Night Fever and Heaven Can Wait with Warren Beatty, with the Wings. I just remember these from a very early age. But growing up in Los Angeles and being African-American in Los Angeles, my parents were civil workers. So they just didn't understand what an artist's life looks like or how you get your child into that. They just thought it was just something that the elite does. And so it was never pursued, but I was constantly reaching out. I was constantly drawing. I was constantly wanting to play an instrument, learning how to play an instrument, wanting to dance. I just did all these things that if my children did that now, because we're so much more aware and we giving permission to our children to do things, I think parents now are more apt to see that their child has a special interest in something and going after that. So I didn't have that growing up. So when I went to Fresno State, the school hired their first African-American professor of theater at my first year there. And he came around to the University 101 classes and asked people to audition for a play called The Colored Museum. I was like, well, I like attention. I'm new. I'm a freshman. Nobody knows me. This would be a good way to meet people. Yeah. And I auditioned, man, and I never looked back. Even though I didn't really understood what it meant to be an artist, I knew that what I was experiencing was something that I really enjoyed and that I wanted to always do. And so I subsequently changed my major to theater. Parents weren't happy about that, but for them, it was, as long as you get a degree, you can get you a job at the post office or where my dad worked, or at the probation department where my mother worked. So it took me a while to graduate from school. I was very involved in a lot of different things, but ultimately I decided to forego all the other options I had: the Air Force, the probation office, the postal worker, and I applied to graduate school. and I got into graduate school, and that's changed my life for a myriad of reasons. I met my wife in graduate school. I went to Illinois, so I left California on my own. Nobody really around me was really supportive. They didn't really understand what I was doing. So it was really a leap of faith for me to do that. And I always felt like I could always, these other options I have, they're always going to be options. But this artist thing, I'm curious to where it's going to lead me. Again, I still didn't understand what it meant to be an artist living and to make a living as an artist. But I knew that I enjoyed it. So I went to graduate school and kind of messed around there for a few years until I finally, it's like a year and a half into it, I finally kind of like, oh, this is what that is. Okay. So let me stop doing this other stuff that I'm doing that's distracting me, and let me focus on this artist life. And so I did that, and then graduated and ultimately moved to New York and lived in New York. My first week in New York in '04, I booked an independent film as a lead. I booked my first equity job, and I booked a musical. All these things in my first week there. So I was like, oh, okay, I can make a living doing this. So let me just go all out and do it. And so that did that and got married in '07. And then we moved to LA. We had a rent controlled apartment. You know, I had an amazing situation where I lived in New York. And one of my fraternity brothers had a brownstone, and my rent was really low. It was all utilities included, and I had 2 bedrooms to myself. It was just an amazing situation. But I couldn't get married and live there. So we got married, and then we decided to move to LA. We had a rent-controlled apartment, and we did that, and we started managing apartments. And I did more theater in LA than I did in New York. You know,
really?
Yeah. People don't know, per capita, Los Angeles has more theater than Chicago and New York combined per capita. It's just not. It's not commercial. It's not for profit. There's a lot of small theaters, but I did some of my most challenging work in Los Angeles. A play called Neighbors by Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. I did Gem of the Ocean by August Wilson twice. I did Dream Girls. These are plays that I just didn't get consideration for some of these kind of productions at big regional theaters because my name just wasn't big enough. Now I can book that stuff, but now I don't want to leave Atlanta. So anyway, I moved to LA. And we just did some amazing work there. And then in 2013, I applied for this position, this professor position at Spelman College. And I was offered the position, this tenure track position, and I was awarded tenure in 2017, 2018. And so we've been here ever since. And so this is where we are now.
Beautiful. Love that journey. And it's so good. I think there's so much to dig into this, and we're going to get so much out of this interview for sure. But let's move on to this first section here. And Keith, look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
My favorite quote is, don't treat people like you want to be treated. Treat them better than you want to be treated.
One-upping the golden rule. Very good. And can you dig into how that's really applied into your life?
It's so funny, post 2020 now, right?
Yeah, thank goodness.
I really live by that mantra, man. And what I found in this industry is that people have a hard time trusting people because they think that most people, which most people are, they're trying to get close to you for some reason. That's not the way I roll. I'm more interested in building the relationship because I'd rather work and collaborate with a friend with an artistic mind that gels with me and I gel with them than to work with a stranger. I work with strangers all the time. But I grew up looking at Robert Townsend films and Spike Lee films, and I saw that they always had these ensembles of actors, at their core actors that they would use, Sam Jackson and David Allen Greer with Robert Townsend. They just used the same, Keenan Ivory Wayans, they use all the same people. And so I've always been interested in that. In full disclosure, I've been fired from a job before. I was fired from a Shakespeare show that I was doing out of state. The day before Tech, I was fired from this job. And I almost quit the business. It was really heartbreaking. But I packed my bags and had to be out of the house and go to New York, back to New York the next day. It was a 12, 15-hour drive. And then that next day, I went to one of these casting sessions that you pay for. It was strategic. I knew this person was casting A Raisin in the Sun at Hartford Stage. And I went in and he said, hey, do you know I'm casting this show? I said, I sure do. And he said, can you come in tomorrow and audition for this role? And I said, I sure can. So I booked that, and I realized that if I was in Wisconsin still, I wouldn't have booked that job, which meant more for my career than the job in Wisconsin would have. And I made
Yeah.
the same amount of money. It's just so I was upset and distraught about losing that job. But I think God opens a door for you, even a metaphorical door, an opportunity for you to grow and expand. And so that's kind of what I did. I kind of went on a tangent there. I don't know if I answered your question, but back to this quote. I think that people are weary of trusting other people. And so I really live my life like this, man. I open my hand, I open my door, I open my heart to people. And I got to be honest, I've been burned a few times. I feel like I have a pretty great life in that I've benefited more from that mantra than I've not. And so I will continue to live by that mantra, which I got from my uncle. Don't treat people like you want to be treated. Treat them better than you want to be treated. I really think that this coronavirus, man, is really challenging us to think about the other person more than we think about ourselves. And it's really been hard for us, especially artists, because artists, this is what we do for a living. We have to think about the other person all the time. The scenes that we're in, the character that we create if we're doing a monologue, we have to create another person and have empathy for that person or sympathy or at least an understanding for that other person. And most people in their daily life, their daily walk, they don't have to operate that way. So this is not a far cry for us to put on a mask, to stay 6 feet away. But for other people, I find it very difficult. But I feel like this mantra would open that up for people.
Yeah, I really like that parallel that you made right there. And I completely agree with you. So good. Thank you for
Oh
sharing
man,
that.
thank you.
And yeah, and let's get into this section here. And Keith, of course, you're an entertainer. I'm an entertainer. And I think that you'd agree that this industry can be one of the most
Mm,
subjective, brutally honest, personally emotional industries in existence.
mhm.
And you know as well as I that in order to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, yes, there is an outrageous amount of fun and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career? And how did you come out the other side better because of it?
I think I get him. I still do, but not as much. Get in my own way, not being patient. Earlier in my career, I would wonder why I wasn't getting the opportunities that I felt like I deserved, like other people. But I found that life is, and maybe it's because I have this other career within education, and then I'm teaching other students to be artists and to enter this field with fervor and bravado that I've shifted a bit and I celebrate other people's successes because what's for me is for me. So I've been my own worst obstacle, but also the other obstacle that I have no control over is access. Access to a room where I can even be considered. This is one of the last occupations on earth where you can be really specific about what you need and what you want and it not be deemed that you are being racist or sexist or anything like that because this is what the role
Hmm.
calls for. You can ask for a biracial, a triracial person that is 5 feet tall with one leg, and you can specifically get that. You can't do that with other jobs. And so I find that for me, access has been, even still today, it's really about your representation. I have no control over that. As a black man doing this thing, most agents, it may be changing now because of everything that's been going on for the past almost year, but they can only represent one of my type. Whereas my white counterparts, they can have 4 or 5 Leo DiCaprio looking people, but they can only have one kind of Wesley Snipes or Denzel or Morris Chestnut type on their roster. So we just don't get the opportunities, or I speak for myself, I didn't feel like I got the opportunities to really show what I could do. In Los Angeles, I would maybe get, I don't know, one television commercial every 3 months, right? Just the pressure of going into a room once every 3 months and showing that you are adept at how you behave on camera. that's not enough runs to really get comfortable with that medium. And what I found that when I moved to Atlanta, which is mostly tape based, you tape self-tape based, and my wife and I taught an on-camera class, and I was teaching consistently at Spelman. I realized that I became a better actor because of my teaching. I was getting like 3 or 4 auditions a week, so I was able to just get better at it. And I wasn't booking when I first got here, but after the first kind of 2 months, it just started happening. Smaller roles and bigger roles and recurring roles and some film roles. So now I'm at a point now where I only go in for a certain kind of character or a certain weight of character in the script. I don't go in for co-stars anymore specifically. So it's recurring or series regular.
Yeah,
and that's because
fantastic.
I can actually afford to pass on those opportunities now.
For sure. And it's also, there's so much to do with getting the reps in, right? And it's one of those wonderful things that we're in this crazy virtual world, even more so since the pandemic hit, that utilizing technology and really leveraging it for casting has provided all of us really a lot more opportunity, especially in the film side of things. We do have the access to those rooms because of things like Actors Access. And you're right. And I'm thinking that this whole industry will be opening up and has already been, and getting more diversified, because clearly that has been a giant issue for a long time, and it's taken up until 2020 for it to really seem to come to a head and really taken seriously. And I think a part of that is that we've had the opportunity and the time, because of COVID, to not move on to the next news cycle, but to actually sit with something for a minute and go, hey, this is a problem. We need to fix this. And thank goodness that it's happening. And I'm excited, and I feel positive about things moving forward. I guess time will tell, and we'll see what becomes, right? Once things go back to normal. But I feel hopeful and feel positive about where the direction that the world and our industry is heading.
Me too.
In regards to access.
Me too. I just, it's hard to navigate or to predict what's going to hit, right? There's so much content. There's so much content. And depending on the network, again, this is access and actually reach. Something on Bounce TV is not going to reach the masses like NBC, of course. Right. So then so these amazing stories, like I did Underground. I did season 2 of Underground. Amazing television show that a network, it was their highest rated show that a network just decided to cancel because they didn't want to do any more scripted shows. So now this story, this retelling, this reimagining, not even reimagining, this telling of slavery from a certain perspective is now being missed. And it's funny, when I was on that show and I was telling people, actually, before I got on the show, I watched it. I was a big fan of the show. It's always a great thing also to become part of a show that you're a fan of. That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, of course.
But people, they did, I don't want to watch a slave show. I don't want to watch a slave show. So because we have been so inundated with the negative, and what Underground did was show that slaves fought. They were smart. They were not conniving, but they had ingenuity, and they fought for a better life. And that's the story of Underground, and that's something that we hadn't seen before. So it's very disappointing when that show was canceled. But I say all that to say it's hard to find the right, like Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai was on YouTube Red, and now it's on Netflix. So the reach is so much further now. I get so much email now from Cobra Kai, but I got none when it was on YouTube Red. I'm excited as you are. I want everybody to see the great stories, because there's a lot of crap out there too. If we're honest.
There we are, yeah. Well, let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living. Or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing in the entertainment industry. Tell us about that.
Wow, I don't know if there was one moment, because I wasn't surrounded with it. Like, there's nobody else in my family that does what I do. Nobody. Right. There's no singers. There's no dancers. There's no, and it's not because the desire isn't there. I think there are a lot of my family members who would love to do it. I just think that they don't know how, and they haven't had access in the schools. There's no arts in the schools pretty much anymore. Yep. So I don't know if there's a moment. I did block something out. I blocked out this moment And I didn't realize I blocked it out until I was in my last semester of graduate school. We had to write kind of one person show thesis. And this memory came back to me because the teacher at the time, Daniel Sullivan, he was excavating for information. So I was telling this one story and he said, wait a minute, this other story, this subsequent story that you breezed over is more interesting than the story you're telling. So what is that about? And there was this story of, I wrote a play when I was about 8 years old.
Oh.
I wrote a play about the birth. I was sitting at church. My parents were big churchgoers, Crenshaw Christian Center in LA, shout out. And we're talking about Christmas. Christmas was coming up. And I said, I wanted to write a play about the birth of Christ. And so I wrote this play. I don't even know how long it was, man. It was, I don't know, 5-6 pages. I don't know. But I have a bunch of cousins. We did it in my living room at home on Hillcrest in South Central Los Angeles. My mom helped me make the costume. She put towels around people's head and put belts around for the wise men. It was like maybe 8 or 9 of us. And we did this thing, man. We had a floor heater that you could talk into and have an echo. And that was my voice of Satan. And I did all this. This. And I never had seen a play before. I had never seen a play. I'd never been to a play. I was never in a play. And we did it. It was maybe 30 minutes or so. And then we had some family that was late. So we did it again, a command performance. And then that was it. Nobody in my family said, you know what, we should get this guy in an acting class or a writing class or something artistic. Nobody. There were 20 people in my house that day. But this is what I'm talking about, our access and what we're exposed to. All my family were from Louisiana who had migrated to Los Angeles. It just wasn't in their realm of thinking. So I can't blame them for that. But I feel like I lost some time. But so if I have to find a moment, that was the moment that I subsequently blocked for 20 years. but that's the moment.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. It's funny when you trace things back and you can think to these moments that really were so profound at the time, but they just slipped right through our cracks. And I had a similar thing when I remember I was listening to a Backstreet Boys CD.
Now, why would you do
CD
that?
Player in the house. Hey, it was my sister's album, but I was listening to it and I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what'd be fun? To entertain. That's all I had. That was I just had a thought go through my head.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it was. And that's kind of where it stayed for a long time because I didn't get into this industry until I was 17 and a half, 18.
Oh, same
I
age.
started dancing and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But when I think back on, I'm like, wow, I remember sitting in the kitchen on the counter and that album playing. And then for whatever reason, I had that thought. I'm like, that'd be fun to do, to go travel around the world and sing and perform. That's all it was. And yeah, you can always trace it back. Hey, it's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. It is funny. It is funny.
Yeah.
And I can sing, but I just never sang around people or there was no lessons, but I sing too. And again, man, I'm not regretful of my life, but I feel like there were some opportunities and some time that I wasted or didn't know I was wasting in my development as an artist.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, let's piggyback on that real quick and let's talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day, the auditions and callbacks, if they happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life and what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
Wow, so many booked it moments because I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a grandfather, I'm an educator. I'm a director. I don't know how to choose just one, but I will say that one of the most rewarding things that I do, that I have done, is empowering my students when they get it, when they get that it's not about performing, but it's about being and existing. And human behavior it's not an appendage. It's a real thing that we need to examine so that when we need to inhabit another character, we don't have to work so hard because we've been observing people intently as artists. And that's how I teach my students. And when they get it, because we have this class called Breath, Voice, and Movement, where we do Laban efforts and we do one gesture, one thought, and we minimalize, we take out all of the bull, we scale it down, and we say, what exactly do you need in this moment? And so when I see a student, and most of them break down, it's usually a moment, it's a cathartic moment of them holding on to something they feel like they needed. And the other part of that, Dane, is some of them find that acting is not their thing, but they still want to be
Yeah.
in the arts. So I have a student who graduated last year who came in as a major. She's a terrible actor. She was terrible. Her first semester, she was terrible. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. And instead of saying, I'm going to change my major, she just started to devour plays by seeing them, by reading them. So the next semester, the next year, when she came back her sophomore year, she auditioned for the lead in a show I was directing, and she booked it. And she booked it because she was the best person in the room that day, and she did some phenomenal work. But in that process of the play, she realized by watching me and our conversations that she was a director. So now she's directing. And now we are co-directing a play called Hands Up, seven testaments by 7 playwrights at the Alliance Theater to open up the season next year. So she's going to have a LORT directing credit on her resume. She's going to be applying to graduate school. Yeah, so those are the booked it moments for me, man.
Yeah, that's so good and so fantastic that you are in the education side of things and that you're able to help guide people through that and have those discoveries, because directing tends to, I think, when it comes to the arts or the performing arts, it's people initially, start off as kids and they're singing around the house or they're dancing or they're acting, playing the part or something. And it's not as often that people are being the directors, but that could be their calling, right? But they get drawn to the arts doing one thing, but really where their passion and where they're really thrive is in a completely different part. And that's amazing. And to know that it's out there, that you can find different avenues in the arts and still be fulfilled or even more fulfilled than you thought you were doing the original thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It really is. And I didn't think it would be so fulfilling. It's really, being a professor, especially at Spelman College, is really fulfilling. Because I teach the Morehouse men and the Spelman women, and some Clark Atlanta University students from time to time too. It's just, and then teaching my African American students, man, I just find a lot of joy out of giving them something that I was void of.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, so good. And let's now take a moment to talk about the present. What projects are you working on now? What are you looking forward to? And we've talked about it a little bit, this global pandemic. How do you see the entertainment industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Question of the day. Precariously, that's how it's going to move forward. It needs to. I really feel there's a responsibility of people who are the access granters, the money makers, to not worry about making as much money as they can, to actually use some of the wealth that they have to better mankind, so that these industries can come back, so that sports can come back, so that entertainment can come back. Because the more we keep on saying, oh, everything's okay now, let's do this little bit, as opposed to just saying, you know what, just suck it up for 4 or 5 months. Doing this little bit is what's hurting us. So I think we need to enter it precariously, with kid gloves, but with the other person in mind, not you, the other person. We have to think about the other. The disease is forcing us to think, because they say if you wear a mask, the mask is not to protect you, it's to protect the other person. And that's what people in this country especially get. They say, if the mask is not going to help me, why would I wear it? It's to help the other person. And if the other person is thinking the same thing, then we're all in the same boat.
Exactly. I'm bringing it back to your quote.
Yeah, bringing it back to my quote. Hey, look at that. So I think I'm looking forward to getting back to work. I think the industry takes itself too seriously sometimes. And I might get in trouble for saying this. I don't know, maybe. But I think that we are doing important work. All of it is not important. All of it's not saving us. Sharknado 3 is not saving us. So I just think that we just need to, it can't always be about the bottom line. It has to be about us as mankind, or humankind, rather. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Wonderful. Thank you. And I agree. Yeah. And it is time now to move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round. I am going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. First question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Family.
Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Don't give up.
Third question. What is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre-COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
What's working for me now is I have discovered in COVID that each character, each person, human or character in a play, is searching for their joy. Hannibal Lecter is searching for his joy, right? Alonzo in Training Day is searching for his joy. Everybody is searching for their joy. So I found that whenever I'm looking at a character now, I'm searching for the joy in the moment, and also in my own life.
So good, yes. And the fourth question, what is your best resource, whether that is a book, a movie, a YouTube video, maybe a podcast or piece of technology you found is helping your career right now?
Wow, the internet, just the access to any type of information that you need. And I tell my students all the time, you walk around with a powerful computer in your back pocket every day, and you have to stop using it to make memes and be mean. You have to use it for good. So if there's a question you have, just ask Google or ask Siri. Why are you asking me? Where's your research? Do your research. If we had the internet when we were coming up, man, we would have been unstoppable, right? So I think the internet, and to use this technology, I watch a lot of television, but I'm literally studying. I'm studying camera shots. I'm enjoying it, but I'm looking with an eye. Look how these background people are entering this frame. What's this music? How's this music motivating the scene? And even the lack of sound, the absence of sound. It's a great movie called Hush on Netflix, and it's about a woman who is deaf and mute. And so in the film, there is absence of sound, and it's interesting to watch this world where sound doesn't and can't exist for this one character.
Yeah. Interesting. I'll have to check that
It's
out
great.
for
It's
sure.
a great movie. Actually, the same guy who directed The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, cool. And the fifth question. If you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently, or would you keep it the same?
Wow, that's a really good question. So when I applied to graduate school, I didn't know anything about graduate school. All I knew was how we had gone to school all these years, taking all these other classes that we weren't interested in. I didn't know going to graduate school was going to be me studying the craft day in, day out. And I also wasn't familiar with other graduate programs. Had I been familiar, I may have applied to Yale or Juilliard or NYU, but I had no idea. So I did the ERTA auditions, which was great. And life works out the way it's supposed to. I have a beautiful family because of that. I have wonderful friends, and my education was what I needed at the time. And so I don't know if I'd do anything different. I don't know. I would have seen more theater growing up. I would have bathed in it. And even in school, in undergrad, I would have seen more than just the Black plays, which I was in most of them. That's all I had an interest in. It's really pretty much a lot of my interest now is plays for the Black experience. But that's not all I see. That's not all I read. I think I just would have ingratiated myself and done a lot more around theater than just being on the outside looking in. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I really kind of stepped into the circle of theater to be a part of it as opposed to an observer outside.
Yes, very good. And the last question, what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career in this industry you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Watch people, watch how they move, and if there's someone that you look up to or admire, reach out to that person. If you're just starting out and you say, I want to be Sterling K. Brown's best friend, well, you're probably shooting too high. And there are probably a lot of other actors more accessible than an multiple Emmy award winning actor that's on television right now. There are professors, there are colleagues or peers. The other thing I would say is to look to your left and look to your right, because the people sitting next to you in that classroom or at the audition will probably be the people that give you a job later on. So you have to start fostering relationships where you are. And I understand that there is a drive to get beyond your current circle, but you have to be patient. You have to be patient, and you have to build up some dexterity and some thick skin in order to get to be in those circles, because those circles are tougher, because there is permission that is granted to be in that circle. Once you're in that circle, you're in, but you have to have something you're bringing. What are you offering? And if you don't know yourself, if you don't know thyself, spend some time with yourself, which I think we have been doing this past year. But I think that there needs to even be more intentionality for us artists to spend time with ourselves so that we know what we're offering a director, a producer, a writer, or a scene partner. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, that's amazing. Perfect. Yes. Know thyself. So good. And to wrap up this interview, Keith, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
I'm going to be washing some clothes tonight. So, no, I'm kidding. So if I'm on a few Netflix series right now, The Haunting of Hill House, Cobra Kai, season 1 and the opening of season 3, maybe coming back, you never know. Black Lightning is on Netflix. Underground is now on OWN. Mile 22 is on Netflix. The Conjuring 3 is coming out. Aretha Franklin Genius is be coming out this year. It's a limited series on Nat Geo, the 3rd season of that. What else is happening? Jungle Cruise and Conjuring were both pushed back from last summer because of COVID. So hopefully this summer they'll be coming out. I think Conjuring is actually going to do the HBO Max streaming thing. Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Keith Arthur Bolden. You can I'm pretty easy to find. I have a website, keitharthurbolden.com. Yeah.
Perfect. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the links to everything Keith just said into the description of this episode so you can easily connect with him. And also, be sure to share this podcast with your fellow entertainers, coaches, teachers, arts and entertainment educators, and anyone you know aspiring to create a career in this industry. You Booked It is the #1 resource of expertise on how to actually create a successful entertainment career. It's integral to helping them succeed and helping you create a better, more fulfilling career in this wild and crazy industry we all love. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next guest. Keith, thank you so much for being on the show today, sharing your journey, your story, and all of those golden nuggets.
Oh, thank you so much. This was fun. Fun.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode and want more like it, be sure to smash that subscribe button. Also, be sure to jump inside the brand new You Booked It community. Head over to youbookeditpodcast.com/community or tap the link in the show notes right now and take your career to the next level. Inside, you'll connect with your people and develop real industry relationships, which, by the way, this podcast has discovered is the #1 fundamental that creates long-term career success. Discover opportunities and join in on over 20 upcoming live masterclasses. Tap the link in the description of this episode, and I'll see you there.